Hey, what's going on, guys? So it's Friday, so another episode of Coffee with Closers. I'm here with Cesar Rodriguez of the Caspian team.
What's going on, guys?
With Y Pickett Realty. So today we're going to talk about what's been happening in the last week in the real estate market. Now, we always want to make sure that we answer any questions that you guys may have, whether you drop it on the live or comment later on. And Cesar had a question from one of his viewers last week when we were talking about the real estate market and rising home prices. So Cesar's going to talk a little bit about ask the question that he had, and we'll talk about it.
So the question that they asked was pretty much, it wasn't even a question. It was more of a statement saying that if the prices kept going up, they were just going to start to offload a bunch of their properties. And my response at that time was to ask them what market they were in, because we're here in Houston and the surrounding areas. It ended up that person was in Iowa and a little bit north of Detroit, which we're not experts in that part of the country. So it was kind of cool to kind of ask him what he thought and what he was seeing. And he was saying that prices are still going up when it comes to that part of the country and a little bit north of Detroit. You know, you hear a lot of bad things about Detroit's market and how it's hard to sell, and they have programs to give you land for free. So hearing that just the outskirts, the suburbs of Detroit are also pretty much going up in prices the same way it is everywhere else.
Yeah, and so it's interesting that you mentioned that it is local. So when we talk about that, when someone talks about like, well, the market isn't moving where I'm at, you got to ask yourself, where exactly is the market that you're talking about, right? And so, for example, the Houston Chronicle just came out with a recent article talking about how Houston home sales prices have increased in the past year. Now, year over year, we're up 4%. And that's no surprise. I mean, despite that interest rates are rising, home buyers are coming back on market. I feel like people have gotten used to the interest rates being at 6%.
Yeah.
And they say, hey, and they see home prices going up. And what I think is most home buyers are saying, hey, I understand where interest rates are, but if I don't buy now, the home price is going to continue going up. So I'm going to pay more into the future, right? And also, if you buy now, there's always an opportunity later on, hopefully, to refinance if interest rates do go down. But at the very least, you locked in a low price and you know exactly what you're paying for right now. I think that's where it's going. So, but Cesar, in your opinion, what do you think is causing what else do you think is causing the rise in high prices?
So I'd say the biggest thing is naturally the obvious answer right now is we're going into the season where it's naturally cyclically higher than it normally is. You know, so where people just got their tax returns, so people have money to put down on a down payment. Lenders are getting creative with what kind of incentives they offer, rate buy downs. The rate buy down is kind of a big one right now. I think people are starting to realize that a rate buy down, so getting a concession towards your rate buy down, is better than just giving a price discount. You know, I think I was running the numbers and it takes about a $30,000 price discount to equal the rate buy down that a $10,000 concession can get you. And therefore, that $10,000 concession gets you a monthly price that's about $200-ish lower than if you had bought with the discounted price. So the rate buy down is, people are starting to get aware of that, or at least lenders are starting to kind of put that in people's heads, and it's starting to happen a lot more now.
Now, the rate buy down in the long term, you really have to look at the situation, because in the long term, it benefits you that you're going to be paying, like you said, you're going to be paying less per month. And in the long run, that savings is going to really add up, right? You're locking in a lower interest rate, you're locking in the low price right now. And in the long run, you're going to be making that money back up, right? So it really depends. So if you're thinking about doing a rate buy down, you have to look at a number of situations. Is how long do you expect to live in the house? Are you going to make that money up in that amount of time, right? The monthly savings, is that going to be enough over the course of the time that you own the home, right? So that's one of the great strategies that we use right now as realtors. Right now is a rate buy down. Is you go in there and we can negotiate something that where the seller can contribute to your closing cost and contribute to that rate buy down, making sure that your payment is as low as possible, right? I mean, our job is to get you into the best situation as possible. So,
and it's actually better for the seller, right? Because an agent might recommend to their seller, let's drop the price. We're not getting offers. The monthly payment's too expensive for people. But at the end of the day, instead of doing, like we said, a $20,000, $30,000 price reduction, instead the seller offers a $10,000 concession to buy the rate down. And at that point, the seller didn't have to lose as much money, right? Or reduce as much. The buyer doesn't have to pay as much monthly. So at the end of the day, everybody wins. So for people thinking, why would I offer money for the buyer to get the rate down? That's why, because your only other option sometimes is to reduce it even more.
To reduce the home prices. So you're talking about the from the home seller side standpoint, right?
Yes, from the home seller.
From the home seller standpoint, what does he gain? What do they gain from reducing or contributing to closing costs? And you said, hey, it might sell faster, right?
Yep.
And so, A, they don't have to reduce the price, which it likely they might have to, right? They might have to. And on top of that, they might have to hold on to the house 1 or 2 more months, which contributes to their monthly holding costs. They have to pay another mortgage or maybe another 2 mortgages, utilities, taxes, insurance. So all those things factor in as to why a seller would be willing to contribute to a buyer. So,
I can tell you from experience, and maybe you've seen this too, is a lot of times when sellers fight us on doing something like that, what ends up happening is we want to be on their side and we want to help them as much as we can, but we can't force them to make that move. At the end of the day, it's their decision if they want to make that move. So what we see happen a lot, at least in my opinion and my experience, is they hold off. They say, I don't want to do that. I'd rather give it another month or two. And in a month or two, they've paid another mortgage payment, a lot more holding costs. And then they do the math and they say, I should have just given the concession or reduced it 2 months ago. I would have lost just the same amount of money versus waiting this long. Now I have to give that concession and I paid 2 extra months of holding costs.
Right. Now you have
that's
to
what I've seen. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, less money out of pocket. And I'm also out of pocket the extra 2-month mortgages, utility costs, all those things.
Exactly.
And so the math has to work out. Okay. Yeah, and exactly like you said, our job is to really lay out the options for our sellers. They're the ones that decide what they're going to do ultimately, right? Our job is just to present the options and say, hey, this is what is available to you right now. My recommendation is you go through this. Ultimately, it's up to the seller to decide, right? They know their situation better than anybody else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Talking about sellers, let me ask you this. We've run into now 3 situations where we have probably 3 different listings coming up because of this. What do you think that is? Something that caused people to want to sell their home. It's not something normal you would think about, but it's kind of starting to grow a little bit. Where I'll give you a clue. People want to be comfortable where they live.
People want to be comfortable where they live?
Yes.
So are we talking about they're relocating to a different area, to from suburb to rural, or are you?
Relocating is right. They're going to list their property. They're going to buy somewhere else. So it's not like they don't want to own a home, but there's something driving them to want to sell.
Is it the neighbors?
Yep.
Is it the neighbors? So I should have guessed the first one.
Yep.
Is it the neighbors? They have too many parties, the drinking and get in the backyard?
No, not that one. That one would probably make you want to stay. But
yeah, no kidding.
We've had one where there was a neighbor that had some mental issues, right? And they have kids, so they don't want their kids around that. We had another one where I think the neighbor's dog broke through the fence and like bit their dog, and their dog is like their baby. So like, and they don't want to, and the neighbor's not very apologetic about it. So at the end of the day, they just want to, be close to that person, and they want to move away from that drama. So that's just 2. And we've had a 3rd one that popped up where, they said their neighbors were just like very, very rude. And it makes me laugh because it's like you're moving because of your neighbors, but I'm also the guy that once sold a house because they didn't let us have ducks. So I can't really say that that's, much different in this situation.
Yeah, well, actually, it wasn't the neighborhood. It was the HOA.
The HOA.
So, long story short, I was actually his agent in that. Right before you get into the business, I was your agent in that. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that phone call was interesting. I got a phone call from you, and you said, "Hey, I need to move." I'm saying, "Great. What's the why do you need to move?" I said, "My HOA doesn't let me have ducks." I'll say ducks. So yeah, interesting. No, and you're right. Obviously, if you want, this is your home. So when you're talking about your home and you want to live comfortably, this is the amount of money you invested in this, and you definitely want to feel when you walk in, you want to say, "This is my sanctuary. This is my place of Zen. This is where I want to go home and relax." And if anything outside, even if it is just a neighbor, when you know that they're just being rude or causing problems with not controlling their pets or doing any of those things, that kind of says, "Hey, am I really in the most comfortable spot?" Right? And again, you're investing a lot of money into this house. This is the house that you're raising your family in. You're bringing your everything is supposed to be comfortable, and that's understandable. I know that sometimes it seems like, well, that might be kind of petty, but in reality, when you think about it, I'm like, well, you do need to have that peace of mind when you come home, right? And so that's one of the situations. And again, I understand that because I've had clients who have had to move because the neighborhood the neighbors just weren't keeping up with their homes, or there were too many carne asadas. By the way, I hope if any of my neighbors, I have a couple carne asadas every once in a while. I'm not too loud. I try to be a good neighbor. I don't know. I cut it down to 12. I think at midnight I'm like, okay, yeah, se acabó, right? Like it's done. 12 midnight, I think we're done. So I try to be respectful of my neighbors. So I don't know. Maybe they'll disagree later on, but I'll invite them to the next carne asada so I can. So I won't be so bad.
They won't get as mad. In my neighborhood, it's funny because everyone always complains about different things, as it is on any Facebook HOA page, right? But when it comes down to someone having a party, my neighbors tend to go on there and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna have a party. We're gonna be parking cars. Sorry about it. It'll be only until 10, 11, whatever they tell us." And most people are like, "I'm more upset you didn't invite me."
Yeah.
So like my neighborhood's pretty cool. People tend to like each other. People still complain. There's always those people, but for the majority's sake, that's not a big deal to them. But I think it goes back to what we were talking about last time, where people who are buying right now, they want to get a home that's ready in exactly the way they want it. Like they don't want to have to put a lot of work in. They want to be able to just buy it, be in it. And that goes with, they want to have neighbors that they like. So how we go about that, that's something to probably think about is, right, how do we know that the new neighborhood they're buying into, the neighbors are going to be okay? It's a little bit of a different story, right? So we got to start thinking about that kind of thing as well now too.
Right. And that's a very difficult question to answer when I have that question is, how is the neighborhood? What does that neighborhood look like? You can give them crime statistics, you can give them, school information, and it's really hard to judge it. And the best way I tell my clients, I say, hey, look, you know what? If we see a neighborhood, let's see if you know anybody in that neighborhood. Let's see if you know a friend or a friend of a friend that lives in that neighborhood. Let's talk to them, see what it's really like. Be the real. Right? We want to get the real of that neighborhood.
Yep.
The other thing I suggest my clients to do is go on a Saturday evening or a Friday evening. I said, you want to see what the neighborhood is like, not just during the day when we go out there and show and everybody's at work or everybody's at school and it's quiet, but you want to see what it's like on a random weekend afternoon and see when the neighbors are coming home and, how they react. Are they waving hi to you? Are they, mad dogging you as you walk up to the driveway into their house, right?
Walking their dog and picking up the poop or not picking up the poop.
Yeah. Do you see families out there and about, that they're doing? And that's a good way to judge is you drive the neighborhood on a random evening and see how it's out in the afternoon, right?
What days do you typically do your carne asadas?
I do it on Saturdays. Right?
So Saturday.
So if you want to know what my neighborhood's like, is you got to drive my neighborhood on a Saturday evening, and you'll see. We'll have the music blasting in the backyard. I have my carne asada going in there. Sometimes Sunday afternoon with brunch and all that. So have the mimosas going. So, yeah, definitely. So that's one of the ways is you want to find out is how you do it. One. See if anybody lives in the neighborhood, a friend of a friend, a relative, someone.
That's a good one.
It's the neighborhood, right? Perhaps a past client of mine has bought in there, and I'll reach out to them and said, hey, I've got a client who's looking into that neighborhood. They have a couple of questions about what it's really like living in that neighborhood. Can you answer a couple questions, right? So that's what we do, right? What's on paper? You can give statistics, crime statistics. Here's the school information. Here's all these things, but that's on paper. That's not always what's real, right? And if we can get into the Facebook groups, that's where we're going to get the real information.
Yeah, you're going to see all the complaining there.
Yeah, we can get into the Facebook groups, then that's when we know exactly what's going on right there.
So if you hate your neighbor, give us a call. We could help you sell your house. That's kind of the moral of the story now, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And we know exactly, if you want to know what the next neighborhood is going to look like, we know exactly how to guide you into getting into that next neighborhood where you know exactly, you get an idea of what you're moving into. So definitely. Anything else going on in the real estate market that you've seen that's caught your eye?
No, that was probably the biggest one. One thing that I've noticed over the last few years as they build communities, though, is it kind of lines up. And builders usually have more stats than we do, and they think 5, 10 years ahead of time, right? Sometimes more. These communities are really being built so that you almost never have to leave your community. You know, they're the really nice ones they're building have really nice running tracks. You know, you could go biking. The playgrounds are like state of the art playgrounds. My son was playing with my nephew at one of these as we were out there showing one day, and they had this cool big mountain that they built. They named the mountain, and there was a slide from the top to the bottom. Everything is built almost like the Ninja Warrior style,
Nice.
parks with cool colors, and then you have like Pelotons in the gyms for the neighborhood. You have 2 pools sometimes. It's almost built like a mini resort, because people like to, especially if they're busy with work a lot. Like I said, they kind of want their home to be their oasis. So they come home to that. They don't have to go anywhere else for the gym. They go there. They go swimming there. Everything is just like local to your neighborhood. So they're building some really cool neighborhoods.
I do have to agree with you on that. The amenities are out of control lately. I mean, I have seen some amenities in some neighborhoods that are just crazy. And I live in a master plan community, and they just the amenities alone in that neighborhood. I have a swimming pool just down the street. We have biking trails. I live next to Lake Houston Dewson Park, which is a great little park right off the lake, and we can bike there. However, one of my favorite neighborhoods, and I'm just saying I'm biased to my neighborhood. I love my neighborhood, so I'm biased. However, I'm going to ask you what your outside of your neighborhood, what are some of your 2 favorite neighborhoods? And I'll go ahead and go with mine. One is Bridgeland. It's off of 290, and it is a huge master plan community, but they have roundabouts in the neighborhood. So, of course, that slows down traffic. It's a very walkable neighborhood. The amenities as far as parks are concerned, they have a tree house. It's a really cool tree house. It's a huge tree house for the kids. The swimming pools. It's just a really nice neighborhood. And another one is actually recent. It's off of 288 South, Pomona. Now their amenities are
That's the one I was at.
That's the one. Yes,
yep, that's
Pomona.
The one I was at.
That is next level. And so I was looking up a couple of friends of mine live in the neighborhood, and we got invited to a crawfish last year on their clubhouse. Everything is modern. I mean, it doesn't feel like you're in the suburbs and that, when you're in there, it feels like you're really at a nice clubhouse type resort. They had, amenities for them to do barbecues, for them to swim. And I think they're just continue building on that one. So that one is also becoming one of my favorite ones. Now, of course, there's plenty of other neighborhoods out there. I just want to point out those are 2 right now. Apart from my neighborhood, they stand out. What about you?
I'd say Pomona kind of caught me off guard, and I saw Pomona when it first was getting going 8 years ago, where it was already there, but it wasn't what it is today. And I had a client go look at those, and they actually chose to go with a different community because that one seemed a little bit far away, But with the way things have grown, that neighborhood for what it gives, the price points are great. And I just liked everything that it felt like a mini oasis resort kind of style, a good mix of people there, people out and about, like everything just felt good. And I want to say the sales, he's a sales guy, right? But in speaking to him, I think they won Community of the Year for like 3 years in a row or something like that. Don't quote me on that. It's what he told me. Maybe he was lying. But you gotta look it up now, right?
No, I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it. But definitely one of my again. I've been there a couple of times, and it easily. I think the first time I drove through there, it caught my eye. I was like, this is probably gonna be one of my favorite communities to recommend. There are plenty of communities depending on where you want to live. However, that one caught my eye, just like Bridgeland did. Those communities really stand out for the amenities that they provide, and like you said. When people come out there and they live at home, they want to make sure that they don't have to drive back to go to do the workouts, to do their jogging. If they can have it at the front door as they step out the front door, that's what they're looking for. So
yeah,
and right now, again, if you have problems with your neighbors and you're doing those things, it's a good time to reevaluate. Where can I move, right? and we can definitely give you suggestions. And still like, hey, you know what? This is what it's going to look like if you decide to move. This is what it's going to look like if you decide to stay. You know, these are the communities that are available that are going to be within your price point. You know, we can go through all those things. So, and
There's Manuel.
there I am right there. And so those are the things that we can definitely guide you on. You want to talk to a professional just rather than doing it on a whim. I know sometimes we might get upset and like, oh, my neighbor decided to, start working on his car and making all this racket. I'm moving. Let's evaluate that. Let's talk about the situation, see what that looks like, and see what that future holds like. And, the one thing from what we said from the Houston Chronicle article and with everything that the Houston Association of Realtors is putting out there is that home prices are going to continue to go up, right? That is one thing. So that's good news for sellers. For buyers, the good news is that, hey, you know what? It's still an opportunity for you guys to go ahead and negotiate a rate buy down with the sellers, right? Get yourself a strong agent like Caesar and myself, and then we'll be able to guide you in that situation. So
we're not biased in that either.
no, we're not. We're not. We're just gonna get two great agents, right?
Yeah.
So with that being said, guys, thanks for joining. If you have any questions, anything that we talked
Let's see
about,
if anyone has any questions. I mean, if you're joining right now, you're watching, feel free to type in whatever questions you have. We don't script this. We just decide to sit down and start talking. And sometimes we don't move the camera to whoever's talking because we just are caught up in our conversation. But we're really doing it to try to get out to everybody, try to answer questions you guys have. It's our opinions. It's what we're thinking. It's what we're seeing. We're not always 100% right, but we try to be, right? So if you have any questions, put them in there, ask us. But if not, we'll be back, next Friday again?
Yeah, we'll be back next Friday at 11 a.m. And again, if you don't think of a question right now, drop it on later on. We'll get to the question